Okay. I'm sorry. What were you? You were. Oh yeah.
I'm not even sure who else is teaching this class this semester.
Yeah, it's just one other professor and one of the students. Yeah, so it's not as interactive. Okay. So I think the way the professors choose to do things.
Right. Yeah, and it
really
very much it depends on how they. One, I'm lucky that I have people that I know here.
Yeah.
Right? At Middlesex, at Union, I really don't have that. So I kind of feel, when I'm at those schools, I kind of feel a little bit kind of out in the ether, and I kind of do my own thing. And I haven't heard anything bad about it, so I'm sure I'm okay. But it's nice to have people to collaborate with here.
What composition technologies do you encourage your freshman students to use and upper students to use?
Composition technologies. For freshmen, again, I only did the one semester here for the freshman comp class.
I guess you could also talk about the other experiences.
Okay. I mean, generally, I use a lot of, in terms of where they're finding their information to make argumentative or persuasive papers. I use the library databases and things like that, and very much try to teach them about good sourcing, right? What makes her a good source? What makes her a reliable source? So I tend to use that. In terms of technologies over there, didn't really do too much in terms of different types of technologies. Okay. In these class, obviously, this one's very heavy in online technology, blogs, etc. Hell, in this class, we got blogs, we got Twitter. We got websites, we got all kinds of things going on. But that's the whole point.
Yeah.
For 2020, in the class that you were in, we got kind of screwed up because we weren't allowed to be in a computer lab. But typically, that class, you remember how that class was set up as past, present, and future?
Yeah.
When we got to the present, and particularly the future, that class was supposed to get a little bit more technology-driven. Okay. Particularly the portfolio portion, we were supposed to be using the web to find information. We were supposed to be using things like PowerPoint and Microsoft Word to create our projects, to create our resumes and all that kind of stuff. And we still did. I just didn't feel like I had the same kind of control as I normally would because we didn't really get to do a lot on a computer.
So that was a constraint in a way.
It was. It was definitely a constraint for that class. We got through it, and I think we got through it pretty well. But I would have really, really, really liked for us to be in a computer lab at least once a week for that towards the end, because I think that those portfolios would have come together a little bit better if we had more universal access to the different things that we would use to construct that portfolio.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Do you believe technology improves either group's writing abilities, or do you simply use it, just because?
I do think that it helps to improve, especially when we do things like blogging. The permission / requirement to write every week, even if it's on whatever we choose, just that requirement that we have a fixed deadline with a fixed audience, I think can drive, because a lot of people are, and I do this myself, I'd like to write, but I just don't have the time. So I like to use the blogs as, okay, you have the time, you have no choice. You know what I mean? So I feel like, just like anything else, the only way you get better at it is to do it over and over and over again. So it's like exercise for writing by having these blogs. So I do feel like the technology does improve writing abilities just because we're required to do it. We know what our audience is, so we're required to start thinking a little bit rhetorically. And again, we're continually practicing, and we're getting feedback on that practice. So we're finding out what works, what doesn't work. Like the blogs for this class, for example.
It's a form of learning, too.
It is. And we started with just here's your blog, come up with an idea, write.
Yeah.
And then we got about maybe a quarter or a third of the way through the class, and we read that article that talked about what's particularly good for online writing.
Right.
And you'll notice that a lot of the blogs in this class, once we read that, started shifting to that style of writing.
Yeah.
Less wall of text, more bullet points, more simple language, simple sentences, sentence structures, lists, etc. Things that we know work well for an internet audience. So we learn things and we're able to kind of put them into practice. So we're not just blogging even for sake of blogging or blogging just because we have to get something out every week, but we're also kind of evolving as writers as it goes.
And you think it also helps like freshmen too when they
Absolutely.
have to write?
Yeah. For freshmen, I think, and I regret not having blogs for that class.
Freshman comp?
Yeah, for the freshman comp class, did we have blogs? No, we just had a portfolio at the end. I regret not really having blogs for that class because I think freshmen in particular, especially the ones that don't love writing, could really benefit from just having that kind of repetition. Not repetition in terms of what they're writing about, but just having that, okay, every week I have to get some little bit of writing out, rather than every 3 to 4 weeks I have to write a huge paper. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So like, when they use like things like Microsoft or PowerPoint, you think that actually like improves the writing ability, or does it just make it more neater to read?
You're talking like using the computer versus handwriting?
Yeah.
I think they both have their benefits.
Okay.
I think that handwriting forces them to slow down a little bit and think about what they're actually trying to say and be kind of economical in words. I can tell the students who have never handwritten anything and who strictly do it just online, because they tend to be the ones that add a whole bunch of words that I guess are meant to either boost the word count or because somebody told them that you're supposed to write, big flowery language when, a simple sentence will also do the trick. So I think that in terms of writing, I think you need to use both a little bit. I think you need to handwrite a little bit, but also, Microsoft Word does its thing. We wouldn't want to handwrite a 10-page essay now, But I do think as far as organizing ideas and whatnot, there's not a whole lot that can be just putting pen to paper.
Yeah, I think with doing it like using technology, it allows you to organize your thoughts more, and maybe that helps with like writing.
Yeah, it depends. Like I said, it also depends on how you use it.
Right.
Like, technology is only as good as the person who's using it. So if you want to use like a Microsoft Word to organize your thoughts, then that's great. But if you're using it because you just open up a blank document and you just want to spit everything out and be done with it, then that's not really doing anything to help you organize. That's more habits that need to change rather than technology playing a part in it, I don't think.
2 more questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Why do you use blogging as a form of learning in 3080? We kind of already discussed
we
that.
kind of went over
good
that.
Exercise.
It's like I said, it's good exercise for writing. It's good to kind of get into that habit. My honest to God hope is that like some of us in this class keep blogging after this class is over. I think some of you guys have like really cool blog ideas, and I would love to see you guys keep using it afterwards. Even if you change it and decide, this just give you a blog where I'm gonna, bitch about my life or whatever. I don't care. But I like the idea that we can keep it going.
Would you look at them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody told me, I'm still using this to blog, I would absolutely check them out.
Yeah. Last question. Have you ever had to deal with plagiarism with students in either group? Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Less so at Kane, but part of that was probably because of the technology. Because it was submitted, the papers here get submitted through Turnitin, or whatever it is. If you do it through Blackboard, there's a way to have them submitted that way. So they get a report back immediately that says, hey, 50% plagiarized. They know that that's not okay, and they go back and fix it. Now, is that teaching them how to write effective, non-plagiarized things, or is that teaching them to, go to what's highlighted and change things around a little bit and not really learn why it's a problem? That's an argument that we could have. I don't think that it's really teaching them how not to plagiarize. I think it's teaching them how to find
fix their
what's
mistakes.
plagiarized and just kind of, change it so it's just good enough. But at Middlesex, I deal with it on a every semester basis. There's at least one or two people, and I don't think I really have much of a problem with it for upper level students. But if you think about the type of assignments that we deal with here, it's hard to plagiarize your own literacy narrative. It's hard to plagiarize your own process analysis. It's certainly hard to plagiarize a multimodal story that, I'm sitting here watching you put together.
Yeah.
But like I said, when it comes to writing, a lot of people aren't willing to put the time in. So,
is it more like research-based things, like where they have to put together a research paper?
Yeah. Anything that is not personal based, I have had somebody attempt to plagiarize on.
And could you tell by the way they were writing, or is it because of the system?
Usually I can tell by the way that they've written. Because usually I have a pretty good idea of who you are as a writer pretty quickly. So when that voice changes, I stop and I say, this doesn't sound like you. And I Google a phrase from the paper, and it comes up. It's really not hard. I think students forget that teachers know how to use Google too.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I have caught students just flat out taking from 123freeessays.com or something like that, and just taking that there, and that's moronic, first of all.
Yeah.
That's a good way to fail the class and get yourself written up for
have you ever
an academic
written?
violation. I've never written anybody up for it, but I have failed them for the class because I put it in my syllabus that if you plagiarize, if you intentionally plagiarize, if I find that you took an essay from freeessays.com, you're going to fail the class. And
even if they passed everything else?
Yes.
Wow.
And I follow through on that because I'm pretty serious about plagiarism. And I think that they need to know that. They need to know that it's a serious offense. And they never don't have any warning about it.
Right.
It tends to be the ones who also did not turn in any drafts, so it can't be caught early if it's accidental plagiarism. If I decide that it's accidental plagiarism or it's non-intentional plagiarism, if I feel like they just didn't cite correctly, I'll give them a 0 on the assignment, I'll say revise, resubmit it, and then we'll go from there. But there's a pretty big gap between, whoops, I didn't cite it correctly, or I didn't know I had to cite this, and I downloaded an essay from freeessays.com. There's a pretty big difference of intent there.
And you're usually able to confront them about it, right?
Yeah. Usually I'll give them back the paper with the 0 and a note, see me.
Yeah.
And we'll talk after class, and I'll explain what the problem is and why this is an issue.
Because sometimes it's also it's not just verbatim, but it's also it's kind of like patch writing is what they call it. It's they have a sense almost of someone else's work in their
own. And that will show up from time to time. More often than not, the problems that I come across in my classes with plagiarism are I was too lazy and I just downloaded the paper because I didn't feel like writing it, or I didn't know how, or I didn't realize that this is not correct in terms of accidentally or unintentionally, or maybe even intentionally, but not taking a full piece of work and just excuse me, and just using a portion of it. And that's usually okay. You didn't know what you were doing. Let's talk about why this is a problem. And usually that's fairly correctable. And usually they don't try it again unless it's a difference of because sometimes you'll find with second language learners the concept of plagiarism doesn't really exist in other cultures. So if you have somebody from a different culture who really can't wrap their mind around the idea of ownership of an idea, and then you have it happening over the course of a couple of papers, that's when it gets really difficult, because you can't let them, they can't get a good grade because it's still plagiarism, but you have to figure out a way to communicate that, what exactly constitutes plagiarism, so that way, they can recognize that what is okay in their own culture is not okay in this culture, and this is, frankly, where they're getting the grade from. That
right.
They need to be able to kind of work within the confines of the rules for our classes and for what we're doing here.
So you definitely notice plagiarism more so in students out of Kane?
Well, like I said, I see it more often in students freshman level and lower.
Freshman level.
But again, part of that is because the upper level classes that I've taught, for the most part, it's very hard to plagiarize because there's a little bit more personal writing involved. Like I say, it would be really hard to plagiarize any of those assignments from 2020.
Yeah.
I think the only one that you might be able to would be your process analysis, but you would be...
Even that is difficult.
You would have to just lie about what your process is. So, and even then, that would be hard because you spend half of the semester compiling those sheets.
Yeah, and have you ever caught it in upper level?
Let me think. If we count freshman comp 2.
Freshman comp 2?
Yeah, well, there's comp 1 and
right,
comp 2.
That one.
If we count comp 2, I've caught it on the research papers at Middlesex.
Okay.
Because those are real research papers. Like, you got to write an 8-page paper, 8 sources on a real time. Like, it's not babying them. So some of them just think, no, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this, and attempt to do that. So I've caught it on that. For my upper level classes, like my true upper level classes, 2020, 3080, and whatever writing argument is, I don't think I've ever caught it because I don't think it's ever happened, because I don't think that any of those assignments really lend themselves to plagiarism.
Okay.
I don't know for sure if we're writing argument, but like I said, I don't even really remember the assignments that I did then because that was so long ago.
Okay.
So,
all right. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Wow, that went on for a while.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, what were you were... oh, yeah.
I'm not even sure who else is teaching this class this semester.
Yeah, it's just one other professor and one of the students. Yeah, so it's not as interactive, so I think, the way the professors choose to do things...
Right, yeah, and it
really
very
affects...
much depends on how they... one, I'm lucky that I have people that I know here.
Yeah.
Right? At Middlesex, at Union, I really don't have that, so... I kind of feel, when I'm at those schools, I kind of feel a little bit kind of out in the ether, and I kind of do my own thing, and I haven't heard anything bad about it, so I'm sure I'm okay. But it's nice to have people to collaborate with here.
What composition technologies do you encourage your freshman students to use and upper your students to?
Composition technologies. For freshmen, again, I only did the one semester here. For the freshman comp class.
I guess you could also talk about the other experiences.
Okay. I mean, generally, I use a lot of, in terms of where they're finding their information to make argumentative or persuasive papers. I use, the library databases and things like that, and very much try to teach them about good sourcing. Right? What makes her a good source? What makes her a reliable source. So I tend to use that. In terms of technologies over there, didn't really do too much in terms of different types of technologies. In these classes, obviously this one's very heavy in online technology, blogs, etc. Hell, in this class we got blogs, we got Twitter. We got websites, we got all kinds of things going on, but that's the whole point.
Yeah.
For 2020, in the class that you were in, we got kind of screwed up because we weren't allowed to be in a computer lab. but typically that class, you remember how that class was set up as past, present, and future?
Yeah.
When we got to the present, and particularly the future, that class was supposed to get a little bit more technology